So the chat will be live as well, right?
You will use the Q&A function.
Q&A function should be in the chat, right?
It's its own.
The Q&A, there it is.
On the bottom, yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. Okay, I'll open that up as well. Okay. All right, we're going for an hour.
Yep.
Okay, let me know when we're live.
We have people starting to join now, so we could start at about 11, just another minute or so.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock now. Those of you who are joining us, we'll just give it a few minutes to let some more people come in.
All right, so we're scheduled to go right up to 12 noon?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, let's get started. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us at our 32nd annual trade show. Thank you for joining us at this first breakout seminar of the program. So we're very excited for it. We have a great program here for you. Your vision for success, mastering the art and science of the sales project. And we have partner and owner of Sandler Training, Rob Fishman. So Rob, you could take it away.
Thanks, Ariane. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you. And let's get started right away because we've got a lot to cover in the next 57 minutes. So we put up together today about what we call mastering the art and science of the sales process. What I'm going to ask you to do is to participate. We got some Q&A boxes up here on Zoom, so you can throw some questions in. But I want you to just take a look at your existing process right now, and let's look at areas that we can apply some art to as well as some science. Here are some affirmations I'm going to give you and some suggestions and rules. Number one is about the process. And a rule that we use is, I am tied to the process, not the outcome. And let me talk about what that means. I am tied to a process of qualifying and disqualifying prospects. If I am tied to the outcome, I tend to sound needy, like I really need their business. So what I'm going to do today is to help you, give you a big picture outline about what are some of the things you can be doing more effectively in your business development strategies right now. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And certainly I've got the Q&A open. At any point, if you have some questions or comments, you're welcome to play along. And let's have some fun in the process. Now, clearly in your life, you might have gone through this path of mastery. I tend to use the martial arts as an example here, but there are 4 levels of learning in general, no matter what it is that you apply yourself to. One is what we call a level of unconscious incompetence. In other words, we don't know what we don't know. And that might mean, and I had an opportunity to watch a videotaping of a salesperson that was talking in a sales call role playing, and he was clicking his pen the whole time. I had no idea that he was doing it until it was told to him. So there's a situation, what we call unconscious incompetence. The awareness or the aha moment is now being in what we call conscious incompetence. I now know I am not good at this. Maybe the first 8 seconds of my prospecting call could be better. There may be some things that I'm not doing. Maybe the way I ask for referrals and introductions. There are some things that are getting in the way, but now I am aware of it. Follow the arrow around now to the conscious competence area. And that's the area where the rubber hits the road. Unfortunately, it's a lot of times people might give up on that area because, again, change is hard, as we know. So definition of insanity, as we know, is doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result, especially now with what's happened through COVID, through the environment, through the changes in business, through the retail sector. You know, there's been some challenges out there, but that a degree of conscious competence is realizing that maybe I need to be doing some things differently. Finally, up at the top is that level of unconscious competence. That's mastery. That's the story of a black belt who doesn't even have to think it through, but reacts naturally. And the level of mastery is such an important part of how we develop our unique selling proposition, how we execute a prospecting call, how we ask for introductions and referrals, how we actually run a sales call itself. So let's go into it now. There is truly an art and a science here. I will give you systematic processes and procedures and systems for you to follow, but I want to sprinkle in the creativity involved around the types of questions that you ask when you are in front of any opportunity in business development. So I'm going to ask you all right now to write this down. 4 categories in your business development. Let's talk about them right now. Write down the word prospecting. And then I ask you to write down the word selling. Write down the word client or customer service. And the last category to write down would be the word administrative or admin for short. But let's think about breaking this into 4 categories right now. What is prospecting? Prospecting is looking for new business opportunities. It's about getting in front of new, filling the funnel, getting new leads, sitting down. Selling is all about the art of selling. It's the meeting, it's the phone call, demo. It's an opportunity for us to have an engagement where you may or may not be doing business with me. On to client service, defined as the things we do for clients. Whatever it is that you do in your world, it's servicing them. And then finally, administrative is all the other stuff that we have to do on a regular, consistent basis for us to run our businesses, or it might be expense reports, those types of things. Equaling 100%, I'd like you to write down how much time, and let's be truthful, how much time you're spending in each of those categories. Prospecting, selling, client service, and administrative, and be brutally honest with yourself. Again, if we're thinking about a change is hard, it requires us holding up a flat mirror and seeing about how effective we truly are in this business development process. And once you got it written down, I'm going to share with you what the numbers are supposed to look like according to the Harvard University Business School, which is sort of an up-and-coming college. Now, the statistics are prospecting 50%, selling 20%, client services 25%, administrative 5%. Now, what's interesting about that is that most of us may be spending too much time in administrative tasks. We may be spending a lot of time with customers instead of looking for new opportunities. A lot of that goes into the complications around having a good prospecting plan. But think about that. 50% of their time, and these are the top salespeople around the world that are spending at least 50% of their time looking for new opportunities. So you'll see you may have a gap based on what I talked about now. It's okay. It allows us a point to go from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. You now may be aware that I need to shift my priorities away from client service functions and getting into more new business development. So let me challenge you on this slide here. I love this quote from John Wooden. It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. Often I meet people who are in sales and I'll ask them how long they've been in sales. And they might tell me I've been in sales 20 years. And I might be thinking, well, maybe they're only in sale 1 year, 20 times. In other words, they never really get any better. So I gave you this graph for you to look at about true success is the zones that we place ourselves in. We may look and think that we're always in this growth zone. And growth zone meaning, do I have the tenacity? Am I constantly asking how I can be a better version of myself? Am I reading books? Am I learning? Am I attending webinars such as this one to improve the way I do something? Have I signed up for a program like Masterclass? Am I reading? Am I educating myself? Am I taking care of myself? Am I in this model that I am constantly improving and getting better and better each day? Am I becoming a better version every day? Look at right below growth zone is what we call comfort zone. And comfort zone is not meant to be disparaging. It's meant to be a realistic statement about the majority of people out there who will say, you know what, I didn't win it all, but I didn't lose it all either. It's sort of moderate. I call these campers as opposed to climbers. That the temperature gets a little warm, we turn the thermostat down. If we think about Mount Everest as an example of 29,000 feet, there's 4 base camps. I may be fine at base camp 4. The air's getting kind of thin, but I'm good. I've gone far enough. Now, panic zone is interesting. What happens to some people when things change, do they adapt or do they start to panic? And especially if you look at business right now, there's some panic going on, but there are those that are keeping true to form by learning to be better versions of themselves to counteract that. And the dead zone is self-explanatory when things don't work out at all. But again, I put this up here as an example of what are some challenges that we face. But let me give you a list. Here's the list of common challenges that I hear all the time from people who are even looking to top grade. And some of these are extraordinarily talented business development professionals. But when it comes to most of the business development issues that I have, some people might say they don't really have a system in place. They may just feel like if they have a sales opportunity, they're just going to wing it and don't really have what we call a pre-call plan, a set series of questions that they can have, the objective of the meeting, what are some questions that I'm going to ask, what are some questions my prospect may ask, how I'm going to answer those questions, and as a result, how will I set the agenda for the meeting is an example of a pre-call plan that's locked and loaded. And again, it's only 5 questions. In some cases, some people might find they're doing a lot of presentations, but they're not winning as much business as they would like to see. Some might really don't know how to close or really truly how to effectively ask for business and get it. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard the words, hey, let me think it over. And that comes up very often. The response might be something a little aggressive or pushy. And then I don't know if this has ever happened to anybody else where there's a sense of rejection that comes in with getting that loss. No thanks, not interested. We're happy with who we have. And that it tends to build up and we tend to feel a sense of rejection. I don't know about how some of you may deal with fees, they're less money than you, or about price and how to deal with that. And again, the decision-making process may be another focus that is a challenge for some. But now let's talk about prospecting now. The prospecting piece is people will say that they're not getting in front of enough new opportunities on a regular, consistent basis. And some may be servicing their clients, but find that they're in this client service mode, like I talked about before, but don't really possess the ability to be able to upsell or engage in additional sales opportunities for the company. And some, there may be resistance or reluctance to pick up the phone, to make any kind of targeted calls, whether it's cold calls, warmer calls, introductory calls. There are some that struggle with gatekeepers. We have some sayings around gatekeepers. In other words, their job is to keep salespeople out. So how do I get myself in? But there are some that struggle with it. Moving on, most businesses, and if you look at your business now, about how much new business comes from one of the areas around business development, we know that introductions and referral generation is a strong, strong way to get business in the door. So some people are sharing that they're not getting enough of these high caliber referrals and introductions from either clients or people that they network and have alliances with. And there are some that are just not comfortable. They feel it might be putting somebody, in a very weird place by asking for a favor of an introduction to somebody else. There are some that work with clients for years and never really get any referrals from them. Down to communication skills, I know that one concern that many have is to be perceived and seen as being that, Herb Tarlick, WKRP, Cincinnati, snake oil skin wearing guy getting out there and trying to push people into buying, the snake oil skin sales guy. I think another one is about the ability for people to know their products and services quite well, but find that their people skills could be better. One of the rules we live by is that people buy from people they like and who are like them. Some don't feel they have the necessary assertiveness and confidence necessary for them to really to develop business consistently. There are some, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, you've got a pretty intimidating group that you're talking to or a person. And there are some that might be what we have called analysis paralysis, analytical thinkers who really can't move as quickly as we would like them to do. And you'll see some other ones here on the screen about lacking relationships, but it's really important for us to be able to identify what some of these issues are. Again, notice what I'm doing today. I'm moving from the blind spot around your individual selling process, identifying the areas that could be better. And what's interesting about this is that even the best ones out there are always looking to improve their game. I often go to an athlete, if I think of Serena Williams as just a remarkable tennis player, or if I think about Rafael Nadal, who's working with a coach to perfect that one part of the game that could always be better at. And that's the climber mindset and growth mode that I'm referring to. So let me move on and talk about the system. Let's get into the science here. The science behind this is that this is a systematic series of actions. For those of you who are thinking, yeah, you know what, I'm winging it when I'm selling, let's press the pause button and let's now get analytical. How do I create my own process? And I would ask you to write down on a piece of paper, for you to take and draw out 5 to 7 boxes right now on a piece of paper and see if you could write out your consistent selling process. What is the step-by-step interaction that you yourself use every time that you're in front of a prospect? What we know that it is a systematic approach. There are specific actions that we've denoted, we've memorized, and we've worked on and gained mastery on, but also defines how we get things done from beginning, middle to end, and a course of action. And what it does is it helps us create mastery. But here's something that happens very often. Your prospect may be more in control than you. And awareness, as we know, is curative. So the way that I'm going to be able to know if my prospect is in control is, here's what is some of the symptoms of it. There's no real understanding of what they need because they're in control. Well, just give us a proposal, send us information, tell us about your company, who have you worked with, are the common questions that prospects ask. What we find also is that we are presenting our solution and we think we're best, but we have not aligned ourselves to what the prospect's need, issues, and challenges are. And here's what happens as a result of that. Our closing efforts are gonna be tough because they're not aligned at all. And now what happens is we start to chase and we find that we're wasting a lot of time and energy. And I would ask you all to look at your pipelines right now. Your pipeline is a list of every prospect that you're talking to right now. And can you clearly write down your mutually agreed clear next step with every opportunity? Not necessarily a follow-up, not necessarily a contact them in 6 months, but can you literally write down, if I was to call your prospect and say, hey, I know you spoke to Mary last week, can you tell me exactly what the clear next step was that you both agreed to? And would they say the same thing that you would? And that's an area of struggle for a lot of people in business development. But here are some of the gaps, and let's define some of them right now. If you think about this, and I'd ask you, if you want to put it into Q&A, you're welcome to, is how you would answer this first statement. That when you look at your own business development strategy right now, again, if I'm thinking in growth mindset, I am going to clearly identify the areas that I know I need to be better in when it comes to prospecting or the sales process itself. I can be more effective and get more business if only I could. Now, as we talked about before on the other slide, it might mean some not getting in front of enough. If I could get in front of more prospects, I know I could be doing more business. If I could shorten my sales process, I know I could be getting more business. If I could get more comfortable with asking for referrals consistently, I could get more business. If I had more strength on the phone for the first 8 seconds of a prospecting call, I would be able to get more business. So here's what you want to really be thinking about right now. That little gap that you have, or the larger gap in where your business development is now and where you'd like it to be, is really what we're focusing right now, because those are the gaps that you're perceiving are getting in the way for the business development that you truly believe that you might have. So you'll see I put 2 buckets at the bottom of the page. Why, you ask? Because bucket B are the issues and challenges of which we have absolutely no control, such as the weather, the economy, the value of the US dollar, in some cases traffic. No control. Why am I going to bother with that? So I want to focus on bucket A. Bucket A is specifically going to be around what are the things that I am identifying that I might be struggling with. It might be that I'm not getting in front of enough new opportunities. In other words, I'm now saying, hey, you know what? If I could get in front of more, I would be able to get more business. So now we start to think, all right, how do I do that? What are some of the approaches? Where am I falling short? Am I analyzing the past attempts for me to be able to learn how to be more effective in that? And now we start to monetize it and say, well, you know what? If my closing ratio is only 10%, how much is that costing me in lost opportunities? How much money am I leaving on the table as a result of that? But the answer lies here. Helping you identify what area of improvement is on what we call the success triangles. And let me walk you through that, because whatever issue you wrote down or you're thinking now as you're watching this webinar is to say, you know what, here's the challenge that I have identified, which again is a growth mode statement, not comfort zone. If I'm not really thinking of anything, all right, maybe I'm doing a great job, but I'm not really identifying the next step. That's comfort zone. Growth zone is I am committed to be better at what I'm doing, and I now am choosing to identify where I'm not good. Let's talk about attitude. Top of the triangle. This has to deal with mindset, conviction. It's having to do with the fact that the human brain processes 60,000 thoughts a day. What's unusual about it is that the way that we're conditioned as human beings is that about 72 to 78% of those thoughts tend to be self-limiting or negative. They're probably not going to answer my call. They're probably already working with somebody. I'm probably not going to get that meeting. It's just the way we're programmed to think. Now, at the top of the triangle is you. By you, the selling professional, you, the human being. What are we doing to take care of our spirit, our mind, and body? Meaning, are we getting better each and every day? Reading, and like I said before. How about my belief in the company that I either own or work for? What about the market that I'm in? Are we in a competitive market? What's my true belief and conviction about our position in the market right now? So all of that, as you can see, is about how we feel about ourselves and the company that we either work for or own, and the market itself. Now, what also goes on to this list in attitude is rejection. I don't know if anybody's ever been rejected before. I know I've been rejected many times in my careers, and that this is one of the instances where we look at it and say, well, how do I recover? You know, if we get rejected 4 times in a row, what could that possibly do to our feeling of self-worth, or that feeling of rejection, or being upset about something? And that's all leading up here on the attitude triangle. I want to now move down to the lower left-hand side of your screen on behavior. And behavior really, truly deals with the commitment to do what we say we're going to do. You see the word goals. What's shocking about the word goals here is that only 3% of people walking the planet have written goals in aspects of their lives, not just about business, finance, health, spirituality, community. All of those areas are where we can set goals for ourselves. And the saying is that if we don't have our own plan, we're usually part of someone else's. So do we possess long-term goals? If I was to see you on the street corner, wearing a mask, of course, and I was to say to you, hey, it's 3 years from today, what does your life look like? Could we clearly articulate what our life does look like in 3 years with accuracy? Do we have short-term goals? What are we looking to accomplish this week, this month, this year? We're now in Q4. What does that look like now for us for the remainder of the year? What are some things we have set for ourselves as goals in order for us to hit those numbers strongly? And now, daily goals. What will I do today? Do I have a series of activities that I can do that will help me in developing more business opportunity? Again, that number is 50% for prospecting and 20% for selling. Plan and action. Let me talk about those. A plan is, if you think about it, I don't know what activities you may be doing for developing new business. So I would ask you to come up with the top 3. What are the top 3 things you may be doing to develop new business right now? And I will give you a list of things that I am constantly hearing, things that we're doing internally as well. As we know, the world has shifted a little bit. And people ask me about, well, we should be doing different things. And my comment to that is, I think we need to be doing the same things differently in this environment, not necessarily doing different things. So the plan, what does it look like? We could talk about marketing behaviors. We could talk about sales behaviors. Here are some examples: targeted calls, networking, referral generation, LinkedIn or social selling, meeting with connections on LinkedIn. There are strategic alliances or centers of influence that I can network with. There are people that I might share a client list with that is not necessarily a competitor. Those are all part of a strategy, and that is a plan that I put together. Action requires discipline, vitality, and guts. Discipline, doing what we say we're going to do regardless of how we feel. Am I accountable? Am I doing the things? So I have somebody to hold me accountable that I do those things. And then finally, do I have the guts to execute them? You notice I have a saying here, which is that it's not how we feel that determines how we act. It's how we act that determines how we feel. Let me say it again. It's not how we feel that determines how we act. It's how we act that determines how we feel. In other words, when do I feel like going to the gym? Never. I mean, I do exercise, but if I do, I push myself to go, but I feel a lot better at the end. The same thing holds true for business development. So again, that's the rule. Now let's shift over to the right side. And I know a lot of development or training is involved around technique focus. And I'm one of those that doesn't necessarily agree that that is the first and foremost aspect of the triangles here. My attitude is going to be first and foremost. My behavior, taking action and doing things like that, is going to be another important element. When the words come out of my mouth or the strategies I use is all part of our technique. How do we execute a phone call? How do we ask for a referral? How do we begin a sales meeting with a prospect? That's technique. And how polished is your technique? So as you look at this triangle now, I'm hoping that if you're in growth mode, you can identify the areas where you believe that you may need to focus on. And if you don't have an area to focus on, and I say this respectfully, you might be in comfort zone. So give it some real good thought here, and I'd love to take any kind of feedback from you in this area. But now I want to talk about the dance itself. Let's talk about the sales buyer-seller dance, because we see this all the time. Think about the last time you had an interaction with a prospective client or customer of yours, and the dance occurs. The prospect wants this, we want this, and now we've got 2 people dancing at the same time. I will share with you, my wife and I are not great dancers together because we're trying to lead each other through the dance, which makes it kind of awkward. I think we need to take some dance lessons. But if the buyer is a better dancer than the seller, it's very clear they're going to lead the dance. And as I go through the series here, I want you to give some real thought to your own business development, and if in fact you're falling trap to some of the issues that come up all the time. Here's the classic selling system. The system's laid out where, listen, I'm going to get a lead. I may get an introduction. I'm going to find out what they need. I'm going to generate some interest because, again, I'm my ninja traditional salesperson. This is the selling system I've always used. I may look for a meeting. Okay, we got a meeting going on. I might present my solution. In other words, it's the best they've seen. I might at this point ask them for some sort of a commitment to either a next step or for me to try to close the business. So what do you think? Does it make sense? Would you like to move forward? And then we get the proverbial Heisman Trophy stance where the hand goes out and you get the old okay, and you hear the objections. But the ninja salesperson of this traditional system is used to hearing this and learns to overcome objections. I hear the word rebuttal used, the feel, felt, found method, whatever it is that's used to try to overturn this objection and turn it back into a sales opportunity, which you can just feel the energy spent doing that, leading to a follow-up, chasing them, and then trying to close this business. I don't know if anybody's here has grown up with a hamster as a child growing up and hearing at 3 a.m. the squeaky wheel with the hamster going on the wheel, because that's typically what happens at the last 3 bullets that you see here. As the salesperson wants to close, the prospect says, hey, not so fast, let me think it over. And now we're trying to chase them to get them to decide. So this is the seller system. This is a good system. It has its limitations because I want to show you now how the prospect has devised a fantastic way to deal with this selling system. Because before that happens, and tell me if this has ever happened to you, who's ever heard these words, hey, let me think it over. And we're sitting and thinking, all right, they're probably going home and probably really thinking about it. But the one that's really thinking it tends to be us. Oh, I have to check with somebody. I got to check with my wife. I got to check with my partner. My cat makes all my decisions here. We might have heard, I need to do some research on this. I got to learn more about what your opportunity is. Going to read up on your company. Listen, we're going to be meeting with other people. We got some other meetings set up. So certainly you got some good information. We'll get back in touch with you. I don't know if anybody's ever heard this now. This is the #1 objection that I've been hearing from people I've been speaking to in COVID, which is, it's not the right time. Yeah, we got so many other issues we're dealing with right now. Yeah, it's not the right time. We're trying to think, okay, when is a good time? You just follow up and that's another objection that comes up. How about this one? Hey, you got any literature? Can you give me a website that I could go to for me to read up more about you? And then my brother, he's in the business. So these are some of the classic ones that you may be used to hearing in your trials and tribulations of trying to do business. But let's now talk about the buyer system because they've got this down to a T. My wife is a psychoanalyst, married 36 years. I don't think I've ever won an argument. I may never. But she had at one time 2 offices, recently closed one due to COVID, and she's working out of the house upstairs. And at the time she had the office, she needed a new piece of furniture. So we went down Route 110 in the Melville area looking for furniture. As we walked in the door, we were greeted by a very friendly young lady. And the first thing that came out of her mouth was, "Hi, can I help you?" And we said, "No, thanks, we're just looking." And it was sort of like, I knew that we wanted to buy something, but why did I find myself just saying that? Yeah, no, thanks, just looking. In other words, share nothing, say nothing, keep your cards close to the vest. So what happens is that the prospect has gotten great at misleading us to lie about any kind of interest they may have. Why? Because here's the rule, if you want to write it down, that people love to buy yet hate to be sold. The next is, if you notice, unpaid consulting is that in sales, in business development, we have a lot of knowledge. We've spent years studying what we do in our areas of expertise, but we tend to give it away for free. We call that unpaid consulting. And we do it in the hope that we might win their business by wowing them about how much we know. And if you can go back and look at how many opportunities that you thought you had it because you wowed them with what you know and see how effective it's been, we become the expert, but yet we find ourselves giving away too much information without getting anything in return. I actually call this Wimp Junction. Unfortunately, it is what it is. I mean, without having to sound too presumptuous, we tend to do that without having a way of having equal level stature. Number 3 is the old proverbial, they'll sound positive. We know that. Hey, Mary, great presentation. Really loved it. You really sound like you know your stuff. And then you hear this. Well, you certainly gave us something to think about. I mean, I don't see any good reason why we wouldn't work with you long-term looking at it, comparing apples to oranges. I say there's probably a pretty good chance I think we might do something looking at long-term. So I'd say definitely, probably good chance. So maybe. So in other words, that's the string you along. From my married people out in the audience today would be the question of, so when you walk down the aisle to get married and you were asked those questions, do you take this person for your lawful wedded spouse, partner, for better or for worse, and in sickness and in health? Was your answer, yeah, let me think it over? Or can I get back to you on that? In other words, where's the true commitment here? And then the last step is what I call VMIMOLOOC. And here's what that means. In other words, there's a non-committal part by the buyer, and now it's follow-up time. So VM stands for voicemail. Hey, I'm going to call and I get their voicemail. Hey, Bob, it's Rob. Hey, really great meeting you last week. Really enjoyed our meeting. Hey, I'm just following up on our conversation. I'll be at my desk. Feel free to give me a call. Here's my number. Thanks. Click. And then the sun sets and then the sun rises, and I, for some reason, don't hear back. So I'll give it a day and maybe call on Wednesday. Okay, ring, ring. Hi, it's Rob again for Bob. Is he in? Yeah, hold on. Hey, Bob, got this Rob Fishman guy on the phone. You want to talk to him? Tell him I'm in a meeting. That's the IM. All right, so I get the voicemail again. Hey, Bob, Rob Fishman. Hey, sorry, we keep missing each other. Yeah, right. So I'm going to be at my desk. Feel free to give me a call. I'll be leaving the office at 12. Here's my number. Here's my email. Here's my Twitter. Here's all the ways you can reach me. Okay, bye. And then OL, as we know, yeah, I'm sorry, they're out to lunch. And the last one is, I'm sorry, they're out of the country for 3 weeks. I've heard these out there in a meeting in the restroom. They're in Kuala Lumpur. They're away from their desk. And then we call this radio silence, make no contact. But in other words, here's what's happened. They have joined the witness protection program. They're no longer reachable. So first, and I mean this respectfully to the system, is first they lie about interest and they steal the information because we give it to them. We hand it to them in the hope and the happy years we have that we're going to close their business because we are the experts. And that is one of the cardinal sins we make. Stringing along, yeah, they're kind of not quite committed, but we think they are. We try to get them into a decision or try to force it, and then they hide from us. But the pop quiz, I ask this question all the time, which is, why is their buyer system not in their own best interest? By them doing what they're doing, what are they truly protecting? And what's interesting about this is, it's not in their own best interest because they're not going to make the best possible decision. It's going to be based normally on either price or other criteria, not necessarily for their own long-term best interest. So I've asked this question. As you know, I've done a lot of work in the financial services arena and insurance as well over the years, as well as technology and manufacturing, distribution. But I ask people this question about, all right, so what makes you different? What makes you different from your competition? And I often do this exercise. I'd say, all right, I'm the prospect, and I say to you, all right, listen, I've been working with a particular financial advisor for many years. Overall, I've been pleased with the relationship. I mean, I'm an open-minded guy. I'd be open to looking to speak and meet with you. So what do you think would be the top 3 reasons I ought to consider working with you? And I ask people to write it down, and I ask you to do it now if you can. If I was your, if I was your customer, right, and you contacted me, and I've been happy, but I'm interested in talking to somebody else, well, what makes you different? And very often, here's what I hear: service, customer experience, reputation, integrity, responsive, competitive, convenient. But here's the challenge. This is called cognitive dissonance. And this is what occurs in the brain all the time when it comes to what we hear and have we heard it before. And if we've heard it before from our competition, not good. In other words, here's a rule. The rule is, if the competition's doing it, stop doing it right away. I'm going to go in a different direction. So let's talk about these essential strategies now. Number 1, creating comfort with your buyer is key. Number 1, the development of trust, because the rule I said before is that people love to buy, yet hate to be sold. So I want to find a way to create what I call disarming honesty. What is a way that I can disarm someone and not have them feel the pressure of a sale happening at them? That is truly the path to what we call credibility. Because if you think about credibility and what it means, it is saying things seemingly not in your best interest at first. Bringing the defense walls down. How do I do that? Is by not trying to sell them. It's promoting self-discovery. So we've done a lot of work in banking and financial services, as I said before, and everybody's about trust. You can trust me. I take those words with a grain of salt because I ask you rhetorically, what is your strategy to create trust with another human being? What are the process you go through that gets people to lower their defense walls and come to their own conclusions that they can trust you and share more information? Because another rule's at the bottom here, that people buy from people they like and who they trust. Here's another aspect of really what I call effective business development. On the path of creating comfort, we just did it with understanding our buyer, what motivates them, what are some of the ways I understand about how to communicate. There may be some people that are very direct and to the point. There may be somebody who's really into creating a relationship and getting to know each other, families and all that other. And there are some that really want to know the nuts and bolts behind your process and how you work. So understanding the nature and communication style of the buyer takes practice and finesse. I can be brutally blunt and say it requires mastery. Truly understanding how people think, act, and how I can adapt a style to suit theirs takes practice. It is not learned overnight. Here's the next, creating comfort, the art of what we call the mutual agreement. Before I said about the aspect of a great pre-call plan, before I get on the phone, before I meet with somebody, do I have a mind map of what I want to accomplish? Or am I just getting on the phone and saying, hey now? So the same thing applies with beginning a meeting. Are there certain aspects of what we call upfront agreements? I've got two sons. My older son, who now lives in London, I remember vividly taking him to the dentist for the first time. And there he was about to get in the dentist chair. I think he was 4 years old. And the dentist, I remember when I went as a kid, it was terrorizing, right? To this point, I still have nightmares from it. Sit down in the chair. For my son, it was asking questions. I want to make sure he's comfortable. We're going to put you up in the chair. I'm going to open your mouth and take a look and probe around and see your teeth. And at the end, I'll give you a toy. Would that be okay? And my kid's like, great. So setting ground rules before a baseball game, before a football game, think about what the ground rules that are established before the start of the game or the game clock. So I want to set ground rules. For example, what's the agenda for our meeting going to sound like? What are we hoping to cover? What is my prospect hoping to cover? For them to say, this was a really good meeting. It was valuable. How much time have we allocated for the meeting? Rather than, okay, I got 10 minutes, what have you got? Have we brought that up so we don't have any interruptions? So think about what some possible outcomes might be. One outcome may be, we're not going to do business. One outcome may be that there just isn't a fit, meaning what I have to offer may not be what you're looking for. And you know what? I'm going to be the first to let you know, and I'm hoping you'll do the same with me. In other words, if it's going to be a no, N-O, I'd like to know, K-N-O-W, sooner than later. I'd rather not be chasing you. If you tell me up front it's not of any interest to you, that is completely okay. Because again, my affirmation is, I am tied to the process, not the outcome. I'm in the process of disqualifying or qualifying. If there's no real reason for us to continue conversation, thank you for your time. I might ask you if anybody you might know, but I'm going to detach. So I want you all to think about this right now. What might be the 4 possible outcomes of a sales interaction? The 4 possible outcomes here. And when I ask this question, I undoubtedly get a yes. That's my favorite outcome. That's why we're here. But also, I might get a no. And a no to me is the second best answer. Now, the other 2, what are remaining? If I've got a yes and I've got a no, what's in between? Some of you may be thinking, well, maybe. Rob, you got to have a maybe, right? And I challenge that, because what maybes do is I don't have any clear steps here. I don't have any next steps. It's sort of like a nebulous outcome, and we're trying to avoid that. So if I can convert my think it overs or maybes into clear next steps, Actionable, mutually agreed, clear next steps. Great. Now the fourth. Let's go back to the beginning. Growth zone. Did we learn a lesson? And I'm a big fan of this. Did we learn a lesson? If we made a mistake, did we learn the art of failing fast? Because failure is an event only. It's not us. We might have created a failure, but did I learn a lesson from it? And if I learned a lesson from it, is it really a failure? Everything we've learned is through the failures we have gone through and lessons learned along the way. What a valuable lesson for us to go through. Now, another possible outcome may be yes. And do I outline what yes looks like? Do I truly define yes? So here's what the whole thing might sound like. I'll use Bob, my imaginary prospect. Bob, thanks so much for inviting me in to your office today. So I know on the phone we talked about spending about 45 minutes to an hour. Does that still work for you? Bob says, sure, no problem at all. And I'll say, so listen, in order for this to be an effective meeting, what I'd like to do is let me sort of share with you. Actually, you know what? Why don't you go first? What are you hoping we talk about today for this to be a valuable meeting for you? And do you mind if I take some notes? And Bob might say, well, I want to know more about your company, who you've worked with, what sectors you focus on, who are some people I could talk to. And that's the prospect telling me, this is what I want to hear in the meeting. And I'm saying, great, what else? Well, you know, your pricing, of course, what else? And they'll say, okay, that's good. And now my response is, well, certainly I made a note of that. And if I could, let me share what I'm hoping to accomplish today, Bob, my imaginary prospect. It's that I sit down with a lot of people. And here's one thing I've learned is that everybody runs their business different. What I'd like to do is learn more about your business, where it is currently with regard to, and you can fill in the blank, where you'd like it to be, what might be some of the things that you see getting in the way. To do that, I often ask a lot of questions, want to make sure you're comfortable with that. Bob says, no problem. And here are one of two things that might happen. One, and we may know this earlier than later, is that we just may not be right for each other. I mean, I'm certainly going to let you know, and I'm hoping you'll do the same for me. I have no problem telling you no. Appreciate that. And here's the flip side. In other words, you may start sitting back and think to yourself, how does this work? How do we get started? In some cases, people may want to start with a small initial project to get a sense of how we operate. There are some that also may find that they may want to get involved in a larger conversation. Certainly, we can leave that to the end if it makes sense. Are you comfortable with that? Sure. So that one-person role play that I just did, which is exhausting, by the way, is that whole idea of setting the pace of what is going to happen now. Because people cannot get mad at you for something you didn't tell them they couldn't do. In other words, there was permission given to ask questions. There was permission given for the amount of time. There was permission given that no is a completely understandable and acceptable answer here. Now look at elephant in the room, what I put down here. The elephant in the room is going to be one of those things that come up, for example, well, listen, I've been really happy with my advisor. I'll meet with you, but I tell you, they've done a pretty good job. So do I dance around the elephant or do I bring it up as part of what I call the mutual agenda? And that's all part of creating a very, very solid mutual agreement. Let me move on to the next. I want to position this at identifying two different parts of my brain. One is the brain section called the prefrontal cortex. The other section of my brain is called the limbic brain system, reptilian. What's interesting about the two is that the prefrontal cortex is accustomed to the what and the how. It's accustomed to features and benefits. It's about what makes me different. It's the language that comes out of my mouth. The limbic brain system knows no language. It is directly connected to the gut and emotion. But what's fascinating about these two different systems is the way that we sell is not engaging the limbic system as much as we potentially could. If you notice, I put an iceberg up on the screen for a reason. There's also a medical doctor to the right for a reason. It's because we may be used to hearing an issue that might be presented to us by a prospective client and go right for the close and go right for the kill. But here's something I want to share with you. Trying to sell to what we call the issue or the pain indicator doesn't work. And if you think about the last 3 or 4 prospects you might have been in front of, did we really spend enough time digging deep and asking enough questions? There's this 70-30 rule that's here about who's talking more. And very often we're doing most of the talking. We're doing more telling than selling, rather than thinking about a doctor who needs to ask better questions. So what is sales malpractice? It's the same as medical malpractice. Medical malpractice is defined as prescription without diagnosis. And how many of us in the business development world are doing exactly the same thing? We think we know what they need because we heard a little bit of pain indication or a little bit of an issue they may have, and put this into your own world, and it is way too early. You'll notice the iceberg here has issues, reasons, and then the impacts. And what is a questioning strategy that we can use to help facilitate discovery by our prospect, not for us to convince them? It's the difference of pushing versus pulling. And what happens to inevitably is I want to create enough leverage and self-discovery by the prospect. And it only comes from the execution and mastery of a really excellent questioning strategy that we use. Interesting about money is there's two issues around money. One is a conceptual, one is a technical one. By conceptual, there are folks I've met who grew up in homes where money was plentiful. I grew up in a home where money was scarce. My dad was an entrepreneur. There are folks that grew up in a home where money was impolite to talk about money. And what's interesting is that the conceptual issue is that if we're selling something that might be more money than we might be used to or triggered to talk about, we're not comfortable with money. And there's a whole psychological element here as well. The technical one is around, well, how do I execute a budget step? Am I talking to the right people? Are they able and willing to invest in a solution? And not just the money, but time and resources to get this done. By the way, those are the three biggest objections you'll hear: time, money, resources. But the childhood messages there is such a powerful one about the whole money concept thing that comes up all the time. And there are some people you may be talking to that are fearful of change, as well as us and the way that we approach money. Next step, decision. This is one that I've seen a lot of sales don't make it because we tend to not do a good enough job in discovering who has and possesses these three important elements if you're taking notes: power, influence, and advocacy. And anytime there's multiple decision makers, are we working to maximize conversations with those that have high power, influence, and advocacy? Now, we've worked with people teaching them strategies of how to work around that through a matrix. But some of the decision pieces is going to be based around timeline. What are some of the pieces they need to have in order for them to have how they make decisions internally, whether it's more complicated or even simple or one person? Who are the people involved? We use the theatrics here about the stars and co-stars, supporting cast and bit players. Stars are the CEOs and business owners, or individuals might be the couple, if you will. Co-stars are authorized by the star. Supporting cast are people that are looking for information that may have high advocacy for you. But the questions around what, who, when, where, why, and how are really important for us. You'll notice there's a theme about asking better questions when you sell and not talking as much, facilitating that self-discovery. The same thing holds true in how we go through this. The question I often ask is doing nothing an option? And also that decision might be a negotiated process. It might be there's a timeline that needs to be debated here. But go back to power, influence, and advocacy. Powerful things here when you think about it. That what does the process look like? Who's in power, 1 to 5? How much influence do they have over the decision? I've seen gatekeepers who've worked for the CEO for 30 years have a lot of influence. Advocacy, are they your champion? If it was up to them, what would they do? Now we've gone through the qualification steps. Pain, do they have an issue? Money, are they willing and able to part with it and to invest in your solution? And decision, are we talking to the right people? Rule, the people that are most enthusiastic about your solution are typically not the final decision makers. Let's now say, okay, check the boxes. I'm now ready to present my solution. I think every one of you are probably amazing when it comes to this right now, is that you truly, you know what the clear next steps are. We're going to present to the solutions only. There is a tendency for us to oversell at this point because we're so, yeah, here's my dog and pony show. But what do we do to be able to bring the future into the present to see whether or not we have a decision, whether yes or no, at the end of some sort of presentation or any kind of proposal? Are we going to do this together? By the way, if any of you are sending proposals, respectfully put, I would stop doing that right away. Here's another one. It's one of the final slides today is about once we've gotten a yes, how do we keep it closed? Anybody know what buyer's remorse is, or what we call vendor vengeance? In other words, if you're taking business away from the incumbent, are you going to get a congratulatory, nice job taking my client away? Or you're going to get a fight on your hands, and you very well might get that fight. How are you rehearsing your new client that they are going to get that call, and what happens if they do? Another case is around buyer's remorse, where people might change their mind, maybe some outside influence. Maybe we didn't do a good enough job in decision, and there's some sort of silent decision maker out there that we were not aware of. What are the key steps that we'll put forward about what our next steps are as we begin working together? And how do we position for future introductions, provided that we've done not only meeting expectations, but exceeding those expectations? And do we have clarity about what our key next steps are there? I love the cartoon that's in there about buyer's remorse items, things that, oh my God, I made this decision. I don't know if anybody's ever had that happen. You've had a buyer change their mind on you and say, hey, listen, I know we just met. Could you hold my check? I'm not quite sure. Or listen, could you just reverse my credit card, please? So as I went through some of these, I want you to see how what's so important in this business development world that we're in right now is that there are going to be challenges, especially now. And the way that we approach our process is to remember that we don't want to stop prospecting. We want to continue to build on those things. But I would ask you to do the following. If you wrote down 3 or 4 activities, not marketing, sales, what are those sales behaviors you wrote down? And give yourself a score, 1 to 10. 1 is, I am terrible at this. And 10 is, I have a black belt. Great. If there's any area in between, then ask yourself, how comfortable am I doing this? And what are some things that I could be doing more effectively to ensure a higher degree of success? You are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. Those of you that I see some of the names of people that are participating in today's session, I know you guys very well. So this way we can certainly connect with each other and find ways that we might be able to collaborate or work together. So I'm happy to open up any questions, but most importantly, if you want to put down a takeaway, we talk about the concept of primacy and recency. Primacy is the main theme. Today was all about the art and science of a sales system that you use. But the recency is, what are some of the nuggets that you took from today? Because you might have said, okay, listen, I think Rob gave a talk. I got a couple things from it. But by tomorrow, 50% it's going to be forgotten. And by next week, we're down to 8% is remaining. So I want to focus on that 8% that if I was to ask you next week that you're taking away from this session today. I'd ask you to jot it down. If you want to put it in the form of a question, would be a great takeaway for you. You have the option to do that through the session today. And I'm hoping that you guys did get a lot of value out of today. We are good friends of the HIA-LI. My business partner, Rich, is a board member. And Terry and the group have been good friends for many years. We're literally down the hall from the HIA-LI. Myself, Rich, a colleague of mine, Pete Fasulo, has also been and has done talks for the HIA-LI for the sales and marketing committee meetings. Lee Shuckman is another one of our colleagues that's also done speaking for the group. You're welcome to join our booth. You'll see us in the virtual trade show. Yes, it is a different year this year, isn't it, with COVID, that we do a virtual trade show. But sincerely, I hope that you did get a lot of benefit from today, and welcome you to either join me on LinkedIn or to come visit me in the booth. So I'm going to turn it back over.
Thank you, Rob. Very great information. You did a great job. It was very informative. And yes, like you said, it's time if anyone wants to head over to the virtual trade show platform. I put the link right in the chat. You could click right there. I'll bring you right over. And that's all I have.
That's all I got too. I'm out of breath.
Okay. Thank you. You did a
Okay,
great.
guys. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. So long.